Welcome, everyone. Dr. Anthony Criniti IV here, also known as Dr. Finance. You're on the Dr. Finance Live podcast. We got an incredible guest today. We got Sir John Shin, and he's also a JD as well, so we can say Dr. John Shin. But Sir John Shin, incredible entrepreneur, investor. He's part of the self-help movement, doing great things. He's got an incredible movie called Think and Grow Rich, the movie. And it's a really cool movie. We're going to learn a lot about that today, as well as Sir John Shin. So welcome, John. How are you, sir?
Fantastic, man. Great to be here.
Absolutely honored to have you here. So, John, the way the format works is we do a quick, like 30-second snapshot of yourself. If you want to give us like a condensed bio, we'll get into your story. Then I got about 20 questions for you, and then we'll conclude. So you figure about a minute to 2 minutes each question as well.
Okay.
All right, great. So first things first, if you can tell the audience about yourself, maybe in 30 seconds or so.
Wow. Well, yeah, my background is in the legal background. You know, I grew up in a very traditional family. So that means to become a doctor or a lawyer. And so I went to law school and then met my wife. 1995, we sat down and realized that the path we were going was not our passion. So we decided to explore some opportunities in the financial industry. We built up a financial business, did well, got into some real estate, did well. Had some money laying around and decided that we would call the foundation the Napoleon Hill Foundation. We got the rights to make a movie and we did the Think and Grow Rich movie, as you alluded to. And then we went on a tour. And then from there, everything kind of went a whole different path that we never even planned on. And then I wrote a book with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, a modern day version of Think and Grow Rich. So now we're doing podcasts, traveling the world, speaking on big stages, and trying to get people to understand the power of the Think and Grow Rich book.
As amazing. Thank you, John. So, John, let's step back for a moment. We'd love to get a detailed version of your story. So you're originally from, I believe you're from originally South Korea, but you're basically from California. You're Californianite from childhood. Is that correct? You want to take us back to the first 10 years?
Yep. Yeah. So parents immigrated from Korea, South Korea, and they landed of all the places, you know, they missed the big old state of Texas, you know, and they ended up here in Southern California. And this is where I grew up. In fact, my parents brought me here on the 100th day we landed at LAX. And so I grew up in Southern California, right there in the barrios. We call it the barrios or the hood in East LA, which isn't like the nicest area, but yeah, we grew up there, my sister and I. And then, you know, we pretty much remained in California since.
That's incredible. So what was the first like 10 years like growing up poor? I mean, you're obviously, you reached the other side of the spectrum, being very wealthy and doing all the great things that you're doing now, but you grew up poor. I mean, that's hard to overcome a lot of those obstacles to get to become a millionaire, let alone the level that you reached. So what was it like at that point?
You know, it's such a great question because, you know, I asked that question to my parents, you know, what was it like, you know, why did you even come to this country, you know? And, you know, we look at Korea today, and today what Korea looks like is not what Korea looked like, you know, 50 years ago, obviously, right? Or, you know, 60 years ago. I mean, Korea was really an underdeveloped or third world country. And so my parents would say to me, look, we came to America seeking, quote unquote, the American dream, which is somewhat controversial, as if the American dream doesn't even exist today. And, you know, I said, well, great. And so my mother, you know, we call her Tiger Mom, and she said to my sister and I, look, we did not come to this country to screw up this opportunity. And that's quote unquote right from my mother's mouth. You know, she said, we did not come to this country to screw up this opportunity. And the opportunity is to have freedom, you know. And so you can pretty much do whatever you want to do. And that is what has been ingrained into my head, my sister's head, by my mother and my father. And so, you know, they came here with literally $500. I mean, that's all they had was $500, $250 a piece. And so they came here and they worked their fanny off. And I grew up in a school that was just pretty much, my sister and I were the only two Asians in the entire school. And so, you know, growing up in the 70s, you know, being an Asian, being a minority, it was not easy because people never even knew what, they did not know the difference between Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Taiwanese. They didn't know the difference. They all thought they were all Chinese, everybody's Chinese, and
Isn't the world like that though? I mean, no matter what the race is, right? Like, no, you can go to Africa or Europe or South America. Whoever doesn't look like you is just those other people.
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
still for the average person, not
Yeah.
the cosmopolitans and stuff.
So, I was bullied, I was one of those kids that definitely stood out, I was a different color, different eyes. I didn't speak English very well because my parents only spoke Korean. So that was also rough. And the roughest thing though was when the principal and the teacher and the school nurse called my parents in. And they basically said, we need to talk to you because we feel there's an issue with your son. And so my mom and my father, they come to the school, they sit down with the faculty, and basically what the school told my parents is that I had a learning disability. And so they wanted to put me in these special ed classes. And I'm in these classes, I go into these special ed classes. And so, but I'm there, but I didn't think I belonged there. Does that make sense, right? Because I didn't think I had special ed needs, but they said I did. So they put me in these special ed needs classes. And so I was separated from all the other kids. And so my parents found me a tutor. So they found me a tutor and they said, okay, we're going to teach this, give them some extra help or whatever. And about 6 months later, the tutor comes to my parents and says, listen, we need to go back and I want to go back to the school with you and talk to these people because they're saying your son has a learning disability, but I don't see that in him. And they said, your son, you know what your son's problem is? And my parents were like, no, what is the problem? And they said, your son's problem is that he doesn't understand English. That's his problem, and so, but he's really pretty smart, and so I want to go back to the school and let them know that I don't think you should be in those classes. Well, they forced me to stay in those classes anyway, and so long story short, my vocabulary picked up. I began understanding English a lot better, because I had a reading comprehension issue. Obviously, if you don't understand the vocabulary, you're going to have a reading comprehension. You're going to read something and not know what it means. So when they said, what'd you read? I'm like, oh, I don't know, and so they thought there was something wrong with me, but that never stopped me. It's crazy. My fourth grade teacher even said to my parents and to me is that I will have a very difficult time in life communicating with people, because at that age, being in the fourth grade, she came, I'll never forget her name. Her name was Mrs. Mowry. And she said that I would never, ever be able to speak and communicate well. And here I am now speaking in front of 50,000 people in a big old auditorium. And now I'm paid 7 figures to speak on stage. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Right back at her.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to invite her and give her a front row seat,
That's a great idea. The honors and privileges of getting to that level.
Yeah.
So thank you, John. I appreciate that. So what did you wind up doing in terms of like entrepreneurship and stuff? Did you always have this skill set in you trying to make money and hustle? Or was that something that you developed from a kid? Different jobs?
Yeah. So when I was in elementary school, they had these chocolate bars. They were like fundraising chocolate bars. And they were like $1 to buy. And I wanted a bike. And one of the prizes that they were giving away was a BMX bike. And it was called a Mongoose. I don't know if you've ever heard of that bike.
I have one.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you got a Mongoose, like you were a cool kid, like, man. And I had
Diamondbacks, by the way. You ever have a Diamondback?
That's right. Yeah. Those were the 2 best bikes, was the
Yeah.
Mongoose and the Diamondback, right?
With the pegs.
That's right. That's right. Have your buddy in the back holding on to you, So I had at the time a Schwinn because that's all our family could afford. And so I had this kind of like bike. It was kind of like the nerdy bike. And it was just like you weren't one of the cool kids. Like the kids made fun of you just because you had a Schwinn. And so I'm like, man, I need to get a Mongoose. But that was like the first prize. And so if you had sold the most amount of chocolate, and I thought to myself, if I can get this bike, and then eventually my chain broke, my front wheel got bent, and then it broke. I think one of the other bully kids actually like took my bike and smashed the wheel. And so I didn't have a bike, and I was walking to and from school. So I said, I got to win this bike. I got to win this bike. So I went literally door to door, okay, selling these candy bars. And I remember going up to, I would go up to the first door, and I said, hi. And I had a big old smile. And I basically said to them, I said, do you have a great roofer? And they said, a roofer, like a roofer in my house, you mean? I was like, yeah, do you have a great roofer? And they said, no, why do you ask? And almost 100% of the time, they would always say, no. Oh, why do you ask? And I say, because when you try this chocolate bar, you're going to go through the roof, and you're going to need to repair it. And here I am, 6, 7, 8 years of age, selling these chocolate bars every year. I became the #1 chocolate sales guy in the city of Glendale, the entire city of all the different schools combined. So not only did I win the Mongoose, but I won several other prizes because I was the #1 in the entire city. And so I guess, back then is when I started to realize I can actually sell, because people bought. And so then from there, I was like, you know what, I want to make money. So I used to ride my Mongoose now down to the liquor store, and I would take a backpack, and I'd stop by the liquor store, and I would buy a bunch of chocolate bars, Snickers. There was this one called whatchamacallit, okay, Musketeers, $100,000 bars. I put them in my backpack, and during recess, and back then those things only cost like 15 cents, 20 cents. And so I would basically during recess go out there, and I would say, hey man, how'd you like 100 grand? And the guy goes, 100 grand? Yeah. And I'd pull out 100 grand bar, and they're like, oh my God, seriously? And I'm like, bro, if you eat this, you could potentially make 100 grand. And they're like, what? And so I would sell them for $1. So I made money because I buy these chocolate bars at 20 cents, and I would sell them at $1, and I would make 80 cents for every single one of those. So every day I would come home with anywhere between $20 to $50 a day in extra cash, and this was just in the 4th grade I was doing this, And so I think I learned early on that this concept of arbitrage, that I could actually buy something at a certain price, and I can actually sell it at a higher price.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. What your story though, interviewing all these amazing folks, one thing I learned, John, is that this is unique. What your skill set was very unique. It's not common to have something like this, and especially to learn it at a young age. So you've always been a hustler pretty much, right? Since you were a kid, right?
Yeah, I think,
different things.
look, I never had any formal sales training, right? I mean,
Yeah.
growing up, people said, have you been to the Tom Hopkins training? I didn't know who Tom Hopkins was, right? I mean, have you been to this sales training? And I'm like, I've never had anything in sales. I think that at the end of the day, for me, there was 2 things. Number one is I was passionate when I was selling something. Okay. And I think that if you lack passion and belief in something, then you're going to have a difficult time. And I didn't have any closing techniques or anything like that. I was just passionate about what I was selling. And number 2, I had a specific outcome, right? I was relentless, and, one of the things I tell people is whatever you want to do, whether it's sales or any endeavor in life, is to take, I call it MIA, which is massive immediate action, right? Massive immediate action. And the thing is the word action comes from the word act, ACT. So when you look at the word action, the letter A, it's an acronym. And one of the things I like to do is teach people and share with people acronyms, because it's just the easy way to remember things. In fact, that's how I got through school, is I would create acronyms for my test questions and stuff that I had to memorize. But the letter A stands for to take appropriate action, right? So in other words, you got a person who's 250 pounds, they go, man, I want to lose 30 pounds, right? Or 50 pounds or 100 pounds, whatever the weight number is. Well, if you're out there in eating, let's say, double cheeseburgers and pizza and highly, concentrated fatty food, excuse me, and you're not losing weight, you can't say it's in your DNA, right? You can't say
Yeah.
this is the way I'm built, it's, you're not taking appropriate action to lose weight, right? And so it's no different about making money. If people say, I want to go make, $500,000 a year or $250,000 a year or $1 million a year, okay, what appropriate action are you taking? I mean, are people listening to the right types of podcasts? Are people listening to people like you in your podcast show? And you've had some amazing people on your show, and they're providing great content, and they could be learning from this. But instead, they're listening to crap on the internet or the news that's really not serving them anyway. So what appropriate action are you taking? The letter C stands for consistency, right? So when I went door to door selling chocolate, did everybody say yes? No, a lot of people said no, right? And so, but that didn't say, oh my God, I'm going to stop selling chocolate. I went to the next house, and I went to the next house, and I went to the next house. I even went and stood in front of grocery stores, right? I went anywhere and everywhere, and I was absolutely, and the letter T stands for tenacity. Was I tenacious? And I was, and trying to win a mongoose, okay? And so I tell people, as you take massive immediate action, make sure that your actions are appropriate, that you stay consistent, okay? And that you are tenacious about taking action.
Thank you, John. So John, going back to your story, I just want to wrap up. So in your teens, what you want to tell us about that, your entrance into college, and how you decided to become a juris doctor, an attorney, a lawyer.
Yeah. So when I got into from high school, I was trying to figure out, like every other kid, is like, what do I want to do with my life? What am I going to do with my life? And my parents would ask me, what are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do? I'm like, I have no idea what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I would just graduate from high school and go to college. And so I applied to all the different universities you can imagine. And so in high school, I was more the social butterfly. I was not an academic guy. I thought school for me was boring. It was like, for instance, I didn't understand why I needed to learn American literature. Does that make sense? Like, I want to go sell more chocolates. I want to go sell, whatever. I wanted to go and sell things, not go and figure out what Robert Frost's poem was, And so, anything that ended with the word ology, I pretty much like failed in. Okay, like physiology, biology, like anything that ended with an ology, I had zero desire to become a medical doctor. I was I had the Howie Mandel syndrome, right, where I was a bit of a germaphobe,
That's why you like finance, by the way, because finance is the science of managing money, and it doesn't have ology in it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I like math,
Yeah.
And so, I applied to all the different schools and no one accepted me. And the reason is because I took this test, and it's called the SAT test. And so I take this test, and at the time, when I took it, there's two different sections, and my combined score was 640. Okay, now if you know anything about SAT scores, the lowest is 400 and the highest is 1600. And in order for you to get into a decent university or college, they usually wanted to see people at like 1200 and above. And I had a 640 combined score. Wow. They say that if you went in there, and it's a Scantron test, and some people may not know what a Scantron is, but you took a number 2 pencil and you bubble in these little bubbles, and they said if you put in your name on that thing correctly and just walk out, you get 400. And so my combined score was 640. And so that, along with like a 2.2, I think, or 2.3 GPA, out of high school, no one wanted to accept me, right? So I got denied at every university, but guess what? I applied just in case there was a chance, So I ended up going to junior college for a couple of years, to Glendale City College, got my AA degree, the associate arts degree, and I applied to different university. But that's when I got my act together. I realized, like, okay, if I have to get into this college, I guess I have to pick up my grades. And so my first 2 years in college, I did pretty well. And so with those grades, I was able to transfer to the University of Southern California. So I went to USC, got into the business program there, got my bachelor's degree, and then came out and went into corporate America. And then I left corporate America. I went to a big Fortune 50 corporation. And then from there, I was like, what does that guy do? And how much does he make? And they said, oh man, if you want to be like that person, you're going to need to have a master's. And I was like, oh, wow. So I was like, okay, what about that person? Yeah, that person has a master's also. So I'm thinking, okay, I guess the game is you got to go and get a master's. So I went back and spoke with my counselor, and my counselor said, maybe you should consider getting a master's, an MBA, and a JD at the same time. So I said, what's a JD? And they said, it's a Juris Doctorate degree. So I said, huh, that's interesting. I said, what does that do? They said, well, that gives you your law degree, and then you can practice law too and become a lawyer. And I was like, huh. And they said, and they, and I got to tell you, this counselor said something to me very unique that really triggered me to decide to go into this program.
He closed you.
Well, yeah, here's what she said. You know what?
Oh,
she said, if you want to win in business, because you got to know the rules of the game. Because if you don't know the rules of the game, how are you going to play the game and have an advantage over everyone else? So I said, what's the rules? She goes, well, that's why you got to go to law school and find out what all the rules are so that you know the rules of the game so you can play this business game. And I was like, huh. And you would have a competitive advantage over everyone if you know the rules. I was like, sounds good to me. I was like, I'd like to have a competitive edge. And so when she said competitive edge, I knew that, number one, there were people that were smarter than me, better looking than me, came from a better, pedigree financially, let's say. I know I love my parents, and they've done a wonderful job, I think, raising my sister and I. But, we certainly didn't come from that wealthy family, So that's why I decided to go and get my MBA JD. So I did that at the University of Southern California as well. So that's it. And then I went to college and left the corporate America, went back to school, and then came out and then went to the district attorney's office and worked there for a bit. And that's where I met my wife, who was also in the same industry. And then that came around to 1994. So 1994, we got married. We sat down and tried to figure out what our business plans would be, what our goals were. And that's when we decided to, start our own business. And that's when we went to the bookstore and started reading books.
So John, I just want to pause at that moment. I think we have a lot of similarities in terms of the educational, financial thing. When you came out of getting your JD, would you say you were still relatively not wealthy at that point, even though you spent years in education?
Yeah, not even close to wealthy, man. I was literally in debt. Between Arlene and I, we had $80,000 of credit card debt when I graduated from college.
Not including the educational debt, I'm sure you'd
That's right. And then on top of that, now, fortunately, my parents did pay for my undergraduate school, but they did not cover my postgraduate, my master's and my JD. So now I'm $250,000 in debt. And then between Arlene and I, she had $250,000. Between the two of us, we had $500,000 credit card debt and $80,000 in credit card debt. So we were in deep trouble. I mean, we had, there were like some friends who said, man, you guys are going to probably have to file bankruptcy, And so we said, nope, that is not going to happen. We will find a way and pay all this off. So.
Wow. So what did you do? I mean, that catches up to your story. So at that point, you're on a mission now.
Yeah, so we decided we're exploring different things that, ideas of business, but we just, number one, we didn't even know really what business to start, and then anything that we looked at required, money. It seemed like you needed some money to get this thing started. And we didn't even have, when people say, well, you don't need a whole lot of money. Well, we didn't even have $100. I mean, we were beyond living paycheck to paycheck, and my pride, my ego, all those things basically would not allow me to go to my parents and said, hey, listen, can you help us out a little bit? It was just, we went to some friends that were successful and said, what's the secret for success? What do I got to do? And they told us things like, oh, you got to work hard, kid. I'm like, work hard. I mean, I know that. Like, give me some more substantive stuff. Like, where do I start? And they're like, oh, man, you just got to, get a license. And I'm like, what kind of license? And I said, get any kind of license. And later on, I found out that the license they were talking about was a license from the city of Los Angeles. So I could open up a business, but I still didn't have a license, But when they said license, that was interesting because then my wife went and spoke with her friend who had a license in the financial industry. And she had her insurance license, she had her Series 6, her Series 63. And she comes home and says, hey, guess what? I think I'm gonna get my Series 663 and my life license. I'm like, that other guy I was talking to who's really successful told me to get a license. And I was like, maybe that's what he was talking about. So that's when I decided to work with my wife, and we both got our licenses in the financial industry.
John, I want to pause there real quick. I have a question for you, and this is just, two guys, similar situation, and many people out there right now, especially. Do you think, in hindsight, now that you became extremely successful, all those years in education, do you think that was worth it to come out at probably 30 years old in debt the way you described? Now you have your education to the max, but like you were disadvantaged to everyone else. People who just got out of high school were way wealthier than you at that point because they had 12 years of a head start.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, first, I think so I don't regret going back. I don't regret going to school, okay? Because at the time, we did not have the resources that people have today. Okay, so we didn't have, can you imagine? We didn't have Zoom, okay? I mean, Zoom was like something we saw in,
Star Trek.
Star Trek, you know what I mean? Yeah, like, I mean, this is ridiculous. We didn't even have, these things here. And what do you call this? It was funny. I was with my mom the other day and she goes, where's my camera? And I'm like, when did you get a camera? She's like, I need my camera. I'm like, when did you get a camera? And she goes, no, my she called it a camera, but she was referring to her phone, right? I mean, and these things were enormous. I mean, these things in the old days, in 1994, they were the size of a brick. Right. I mean, we didn't put this in our purse or strap them on the side of our hip. I mean, they would rip your pants off. They were the size of a brick. I mean, we didn't have this. We didn't have podcasts. We didn't have email. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have what they call influencers. Okay. I mean, back in the 80s, mid 80s, when you wanted to start a business, nobody wanted to tell you their secret because they were so concerned that you would steal their ideas and go and compete with them. And so back then, and the mindset was that you would have to have a college degree, right? Because not everyone had a chance to go to college. And going to college was not only a place to learn, but it was a weeding out process, right? And so, how many people out of high school actually went to college? And then how many people who went to college actually graduated? So if you were able to graduate, you were one of the few that had the ability to, endure, the test of your stamina and your emotional stress and everything else to actually graduate. So that was the test, I think, back then, Well, fast forward today, everything you can learn now, I think in college, you can pretty much go to YouTube University and learn, right? And so I played the piano, but I had a piano teacher who came to my house twice a week, and whatever dollar amount my mother paid, my mother paid, her. That's how I learned piano. My son, Andrew, is a piano player now. And one day I came into the house and he was playing Moonlight Sonata, right? And he was playing it, and I thought it was like kind of like somebody was at our house, and I go and I look, and it's my son playing the piano. I go, when did you learn how to play like that? He goes, oh, I just learned it on YouTube. I mean, so, and I've heard so many people say they've learned things on YouTube. And so you can pretty much learn everything on YouTube. But fortunately, now you have podcasts, people like you who are bringing in these experts and thought leaders to share content with your audience. And so these things didn't exist. So I don't necessarily think you need to go to college today anymore to be financially well off.
Thank you, John. All right. So bringing it full circle, basically you eventually got to the point where You were very successful with the financial business, and maybe another minute or two if you can wrap it up and bring us to full circle. Now, don't forget, I got about 20 questions to ask you. A lot of them will cover different parts of your story anyway. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, so we got our licenses, and then we started, obviously having to find clients. We started selling, we got referrals. But one thing is, I was very tough on myself. I would tell my mom, and I tell my father, and I tell my wife, I said, I'm not coming home tonight. And they said, why aren't you coming home? And I said, unless I make a sale, I'm not coming home. And so, one of the things I would do is I would actually, after hours, Arlene would go, where are you at? She goes, are you coming home? I'm like, no, I'm not coming home until I make a sale. She goes, well, it's 9 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock at night. And I said, well, there's a Denny's and there's got to be people there because it's open. She goes, you're going to go to a Denny's? I'm like, I'm going to go to a Denny's because there's people there. And I would literally go from table to table and say, excuse me, I was just sitting over at that table, I was just eating, and I wanted to ask you, because I've come across something very interesting, and I just wanted to ask you guys a quick question, which could absolutely change your life. And they said, what is it? And I said, have you ever heard of the rule of 72? And they said, the rule of what? And I go, the rule of 72. And they go, never heard of it. And I was like, do you have a moment I could just write? So I took this thing called the rule of 72, and I would write it on a piece of paper. And I said, just wanted to leave this for you guys. If you have any questions about money or finance, give me a call. And I wrote my name on a business, not on a business card, on a napkin. And so that's what I did. And then someone else said, I've been looking and thinking about saving money, they would say. And I said, it's kind of interesting that you came to my table. I feel like you're like a sign from God telling me that I got to look at my finances. And I said, maybe, I don't know, and so I started getting clients like that, and then eventually what happens, I walked in one day to a Denny's, and the Denny's manager said, John, I'm sorry, but you can't come into dine at our restaurant tonight. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, yeah, we have a letter, a memo from corporate that you're actually banned from all Denny's. And I'm like, no, you're kidding, man. No, John, I'm serious. I'm like, no way. And they show me the letter, and it was a picture of me. Someone took a picture of me, and said, this is the guy. Like, it was like a mugshot almost of me. And I could not go to a single Denny's in Southern California.
What year was this?
This was now 1995.
Okay. The reason I'm asking that is because I want to put this in context, folks. There was no smartphone at the time, no camera on a phone. So
yeah.
For someone to have a camera in 1995, I mean, there was intention there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And so I was banned from all Denny's, and I never told Arlene. And I remember, like, after church or before church, she'd go, let's go get a quick breakfast. You want to go to Denny's? I'm like, no. Let's go to Norm's. There was another restaurant called Norm's. And so we would not, go to Denny's. So then next thing I know, my wife calls me again. She's like, where are you at? She goes, I did tell her eventually I was banned from Denny's, but she goes, well, you're banned from Denny's, so you can't go there anymore. And she's like, yeah. I said, I'm going to find somewhere where I can go. And so I eventually pulled into this parking lot. And I was driving by, and it said open 24 hours. That's what it said, a big old red thing, and it was blinking. It said open 24 hours. She goes, where are you at? I said, I'm at a hospital. She goes, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm here because it's open. She's like, what? She goes, you're at a hospital? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go in the hospital. I'm gonna sell some policies. She goes, are you crazy? She goes, you can't go. I go, I'm going to go in there. There's these nurses and doctors and these medical professionals need to start planning for their future too. She's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, yeah. So I pulled out my briefcase, which looked like a suitcase, right, with all these different applications and prospectuses. And I literally rolled my suitcase in my suit. I would wear a suit with a tie. Okay. And I walked up to the security guard, and the security guy was sitting there, and he goes, sir, he goes, visitation hours are over. And I was like, oh, I'm not here for visitation. I said, I'm the financial retirement specialist. I need to get up to the maternity ward and talk to all the nurses and doctors there. I think they need me up there. And then he goes, oh, okay. And he goes, great. You got an ID? And I show him my ID, and then he gives me a badge. and I got a little sticky badge. I pushed it on myself. And I said, by the way, what floor is it? And he's like, 6th floor or whatever it was. I forgot. And I go up to the elevator. As I'm going to the elevator, my inside voice started saying to me and says, I can't believe you just got away with that. Like, so I got a badge on, I got my briefcase, and I'm like literally going up to the 6th floor. The thing opens and I walk up to the nursing counter and I said, hi, I said, my name is John Shin. I'm your retirement specialist. Where would you like me to get set up so I can have you guys come in during your breaks? Maybe on the hour, every half an hour, you guys can come in and I can get you guys all squared away. And the nurse goes, oh yeah, sure. Why don't we get you squared away in the doctor's mess? So we take you over there and you can get set up, and then I'll have the first nurse come in and talk to you. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I didn't say it out loud. I said it to myself, like, I can't believe this is happening. First nurse comes in and says, okay, I've got my 403B. This is what I'm putting in. Do you think this is the right investments? And I'm like, yeah, well, here. And I started giving advice one after another. And I kept on going back. And then I left that hospital, went to another hospital, to another hospital. I became the #1 salesperson in the entire country that year, right? Where I wrote over $1 million in premiums. And just insurance premiums, by the way, with my own pen. Okay. So that's what I did to be where I'm at, to be what they call successful, So then I made some money, and then I got the referrals, and then my first guy, I just couldn't get to see all my clients anymore. So I had to hire my first guy. And my first guy that I personally trained and coached and mentored said, John, he says, my wife got a pay raise and we have to relocate to Arizona. And I was like, Arizona? I said, what are you going to do when you get there? And he goes, well, that's the question I have for you, is I don't know what I can do considering that your office is here and you don't have an office in Arizona. And I was like, well, I said, let me ask you a question. I said, what if I opened up an office? The guy goes, well, John, if you had an office there, I would work for you. And I said, okay. Now, let me ask you a question. I said, I can't be at 2 places at one time. What if I opened up an office and you ran it, and I would give you a percentage of the profits and become my partner, and I'll give you equity in there? And he goes, oh my God, that sounds great. Let's do it. And so that is how I opened up my first office outside of California.
Wow.
And so the money that I generated from that office in Arizona, I came back and I was like, Arlene, look at all this money we're making from Arizona too. We don't need this. What should we do? And she says, let's just open up another office somewhere else, see if somebody wants to move. And so I came back and had a big meeting, and I had a big old room, and I had about 100 agents at the time. And I said, who would like to relocate to another place? And someone said, I'll move to Brooklyn. And someone else said, I'll go to Houston. And someone else said, I'll go to Vegas. And next thing I know, I'm like, oh my God, well, one at a time. And then I started relocating people one at a time and planting them in all of the 50 states. So now we operate in all 50 states now. We have an office in all 50 states now. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, you're still going. The business is still rolling.
Oh yeah, that's my bread and butter, man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that company, like last year, 2023, I think we probably did close to $60 million.
1 year?
Yeah.
Wow. And so you've been.
By the way, 60 million is not gross revenues, that's net revenues.
How long you been doing it for?
1994.
So yeah, wow, almost 30 years. Incredible. Yeah, the average person usually doesn't survive, I think, the first year in that business. Is that right? Like 90%?
Yeah.
And
Right.
you made it 30 years.
Yeah. And we didn't have just one, but we had multiple locations.
That's incredible. Thank you,
Yeah.
John. All right, John. So yeah, we're going to pivot now to questions, which basically will cover different parts of your story anyway. So thank you. You're doing great so far, John. I want to ask you about your book. So let's start with your books. Any books you want to talk about? Figure about a minute each question so we can make good time. Got about 20 questions.
Yeah. So my book is called How Rich Asians Think. And what happened was, when the Think and Grow Rich movie came out, I was asked by a big company to come and speak at their national convention. So I went to their national convention and I spoke, and I got off a stage, and you probably know when you're speaking on a big stage, you get off, if you do pretty well, people swarm you, they want to take your picture and selfies, and they want autographs and all that. And everyone said, John, your talk was amazing, but you never mentioned the name of your book. And I'm like, oh yeah. I said, you know what? I said, give me your email or a business card. I'll send you a digital copy. And I literally, between my staff member and I, we probably came home with a few thousand emails. Okay. And so Arlene says, well, how did it go? What did you think? And I was like, honey, I said, I felt like a rock star, man. You should have seen me. I wish you were there. And she goes, all right, so now what? What's next? And I said, I need to write a book. And she goes, what? And I go, I need to write a book. And she goes, what do you mean you got to write a book? Why do you got to write a book? And I said, yeah, because I just told a few thousand people I'd send them a digital copy. That's why. She goes, why would you tell them that? Like, why would you tell them that you would send them a book when you don't have a book? And I was like, well, because every speaker on stage had a book, except for me. I was the only guy who didn't have a book. And I felt so stupid. I was like, I said, I didn't want to say I don't have a book, so I said, I'll send you a copy. And she goes, oh my God, are you crazy? And so I go online, Google how to write a book, right? And next thing I know, I thought I find this book and it's called Think and Grow Rich, a Black choice. And then there's a Think and Grow Rich, a Latino choice. And then there's a Think and Grow Rich for women. And then I thought, okay, I wonder who did the Asian one. So I typed in Think and Grow Rich, an Asian choice. And nothing comes to surface on Google search. And so I went to Amazon, I went to all the different bookstores, couldn't find it. And so I called the Napoleon Hill Foundation, spoke to Don Green, and Don Green, I asked him, I said, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, an Asian choice? And he goes, well, we don't have anybody. I'm like, what? How is that possible? And he says, I said, there's 4 billion Asians on this planet, and you don't have an Asian version of this? And he goes, no. I said, what are you looking for? And he starts telling me, and I was like, oh my God. I said, I know one person who would be a fantastic candidate for writing a book with the foundation. And he goes, who? And I said, me. And that's how I got the rights.
Wow.
3 days later, I got a contract in the email. I signed it, sent it right back, and I wrote a book with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. It was called Think and Grow Rich, an Asian Choice. We got picked up by a big publishing company called Sound Wisdom, and Sound Wisdom said, look, there's so many Think and Grow Rich titles already that we think that your book would get buried in all the algorithms. You may want to consider changing the title. And I said, what do you think? And they said, what about how rich Asians think and grow rich? All right, sounds good. Let's do it. Well, then all of a sudden, a movie I was out there called Crazy Rich Asians. And that was also a book that became a wonderful movie. It was a romantic comedy movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But when people went on Amazon and typed in Crazy Rich Asians for the movie, algorithms of Amazon said people who bought that also bought How Rich Asians Think. Right. And how people then vice versa, people about How Rich Asians Think also bought Crazy Rich Asians. And so it was great marriage at the same time coming out, and the book just took off worldwide. So
but was it worth it? Just curious. Sharon Lecter is my mentor, and I never really asked her this question, but I'm curious, like, what was it worth it writing a book with the Napoleon Hill Foundation? Do you think that that really helped your brand out a lot, being able to stamp their name on the cover?
Yeah, I mean, here's what was really cool is the fact that I was able to, so if you read the original book, Think and Grow Rich,
Yeah.
okay, it is, some of the greatest industrial giants that ever walked this planet, right? Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, all those people. Unfortunately, today, I walked up to some people, a group, an audience, and I said, do you know who Henry Ford is? And the response to me from them was, they said, yeah, he used to be the former president. And I said, the former president of, and they go, come on, like the United States. And I'm like, yikes, like that's the wrong Ford,
Right.
I asked them, I said, you ever heard of the Wright brothers? They're like, are they like a blues group like from the 60s or something? And I was like, no, wrong Wright brothers, like they don't know the people in the past. They want to
Right.
know about the more modern day Elon Musk, right? Jeff Bezos, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, right? People, the modern day success stories. So I went and interviewed those people for my book. So it was interesting that by using Think and Grow Rich, I was able to go in and have an opportunity to sit with some of these big name celebrities. you know.
Napoleon Hill Foundation was able to get you in front of these people.
No. I called them myself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I called them and said, hey, my name is John Shin. I'm writing a modern day version of Think and Grow Rich.
Wow.
Are you familiar with this book? And they said, oh my God, that book changed my life. I recommend it to everybody. I'm like, wow, that's great. You know, I said, I'd love to interview you and just get a couple questions. And so that was how I was able to meet all these different people. Because originally it was a modern day, the book was going to be the modern day Think and Grow Rich, you know, but then we changed the title to How Rich Asians Think.
Was there any other books that you had, John? Or was that your
No, that was the first and only book I've written so far. But I do have 3 books, you know, in draft right now, and one should be coming out shortly, hopefully by mid-year.
Okay, cool. Thank you, John. John, that ties into the next question, which ties into a major project you did. So Think and Grow Rich, the movie, the first time I heard this, I was curious myself. I want to know about this. What, you know, was it The Secret? Was it something that was like an extension of The Secret? Was it a different take on the book? So can you tell us a little bit about the story behind Think and Grow Rich, the movie, how you came about to decide to make this movie, its a track record, and anything else you want to talk about the movie?
Yeah, great question. So I was sitting at my kitchen table with Arlene, and we're sitting there, and one thing I do is I have a weekly staff meeting, right? So the whole staff and I, we get on the same page. I'll have leadership meetings that we're all on the same page. And I thought to myself, if I'm having a staff meeting, leadership meetings, you know, I have meetings with all my lawyers and my accountants and CPAs and, you know, all that. I said, how do I not have a meeting with my own family? Right. So I have 4 kids. I have a boy, girl, my wife and I, the 6 of us. So every single Sunday we'd go to church, we'd go and have lunch, brunch, whatever. We'd go shopping, we'd come home. And then at night I would do a 1-hour talk with my children. Right. And so I would do that every single week. Well, now that they're a little older, I thought, you know, maybe we could use the Think and Grow Rich workbook, right? And have everyone, you know, use the workbook. And I said to Arlene, I was like, maybe we'll use Think and Grow Rich as the book that we can all go through the workbook and study, and we'll get the kids to read Think and Grow Rich. So she says, oh, good luck. I don't think they're going to read a book. You know, this generation, if it's not on Netflix or if it's not on YouTube or Hulu or something, some streaming platform, they're not gonna read. They might like skim through it, highlight, look for the, you know, the bullet points in the back of every chapter or something, a summary. And I'm like, huh. I said, she goes, yeah, they'll probably watch the movie. And I said, I didn't know there was a movie. So we literally open up our computers on our kitchen table and we type in Think and Grow Rich movie, and nothing comes up. Nothing on YouTube, nothing on the internet. And I said, honey, I said, I don't think there's a movie. And she goes, there has to be. I mean, this book has sold 200 million copies around the world. I mean, it's the #1 sold book in the world. She says, somebody's got to. And I'm like, well, I can't find it.
No one made the movie?
No one has ever made the movie. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And just so you know, there are only, okay, so non-religious, okay, we're not going down that path, but I'm just saying, how many books have crossed over 100 million? And there's only 3, which is Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and the Twilight Saga. That's it, 3. That's crossed over 100. How many books since 1937 have crossed over 100 million or even 200 million? And that's Think and Grow Rich. That's it. That's the only book that's crossed over 200 million on this planet since 1937. Like, someone has to have made a movie, and no one did. And so I literally pick up the phone, ring, ring, ring. And that's another whole story that we could do on another podcast, because I want to turn this into a book itself or a movie, is how we got the rights. But long story short, I called the foundation and I said, you guys have a movie? And they said, no. And I said, well, why not? And I said, well, it's just, you know, we just don't have that kind of a budget, you know, to just throw at. We're a nonprofit organization. We're helping families and children and students and all that. We don't have a big Hollywood budget to make a movie. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, I would be willing to put up the money to make the movie if you give me the rights, and I'll give you guys a percentage, right? You know, and long story short, I got the rights. 2013.
What was the budget for that? How much it cost?
Well, that's a great question. So we actually said, well, after we got the rights, then it was like, okay, now how do we put the movie together? I've never made a movie in my entire life. Okay. And by the way, there is a takeaway from that, right? Because now that I speak everywhere and I get people who walk up to me and they said, oh, I was going to call the foundation and get the rights. I was going to call. You know how many times people have said to me, I was going to call the foundation and get the rights? Oh, I was going to. I had that idea. So I always ask them, so why didn't you? Like if you had the idea, why didn't you? Why didn't you do it? And so here's what I tell people is to ask, and this is the lesson for everyone right now, is to ask without fear. Because everyone said, oh, I probably would have got rejected. Oh, I don't think they would have given me the right. So they already in their own mind had an outcome of the foundation saying no. And so they never even asked. So their fear prevented them from actually moving forward. And I was the only guy actually called them up and and asked without fear. And so I hope people take a lesson from that. Same thing when I call these celebrities and their agents, like Steve Aoki. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you or not, right? He's a big DJ. And
he was on the cover of Entrepreneur this month.
Yeah. So I said, people said, Steve will never do an interview with you. I'm like, you want to bet? I was like, I'm going to get Steve on, not only that, I had the longest interview of everyone. I interviewed Steve Aoki for 4.5 hours. Okay. And so, and now he calls me sensei because during that 4.5 hours, he says that he learned more from me than he felt like he gave me for the actual podcast, for the interview. But so then I've never made a movie. Then we got, producers and directors and, all that. And I was like, how much is it going to cost me? And they said, I think this will probably cost you about 500 grand. I'm like, 500. I'm like, okay, I could do that. You know what I mean? And then as we were filming, we're like, wait, we want to add this. We want to add that. We want to add this. We want to bring in this cast member. We want to, and $6 million later, we finished the movie. So
wow, that's incredible. What's the reach on that so far?
Worldwide, I think we're now doing probably close to 65 million.
And when was the movie published or produced? 2008?
Yeah, 2018.
Oh, 18. Wow. So only 4 or 5 years and you've had that impact.
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
Wow. That's incredible. So, wow. Well, thank you, John. Appreciate you sharing that. And that's it. Folks, check it out. That's Think and Grow Rich, the movie. How can you miss that title? I can't believe they never came up with that movie before. It's such an obvious one. But, North America and South America was obvious too, but no one knew where it was, right? Until they actually, like you said, without fear, went and searched for it. So
right. That's right.
All right. Well, thank you, John. John, next question. How does someone become royalty? Maybe a minute or less, because you're Sir John Shin. I know you really love the knight stuff. And maybe we could probably talk an hour about this, but
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, gosh, let me see if I can do it in an hour. I got a call from a friend. His name is Bill, and he goes, hey, John, he goes, you're doing all this amazing work around the world. He goes, someone like you should be knighted by a royal king, queen, or prince. And I say, oh, and I said, that would be awesome. And he goes, would you like to be knighted? And I go, who wouldn't? And he goes, what if I can make that happen for you? And I said, let me know. And he goes, okay. I told this prince, his name is Prince Raphael from Spain, about you. And he's looked into who you are. And he called me back and said, I would like to knight that person. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And he said, yeah, in fact, he's going to come out to California, to Beverly Hills, and he's going to not only knight you, but several other people if you want to show up. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm like, he goes, that's it. I'm like, okay.
Oh, you didn't have to even fly there. They came to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Which was kind of cool, And yeah. I said, so then I was a little skeptical, and I said, okay, is there a cost for this? That's the first question I asked. I got, is there a cost or a fee? I have to pay anything? And he goes, no, not at all. And I was like, but you do have to cover the cost of your meals, and I was like, okay, other than that, is there anything? And I said, nope. And I was like, all right. And next thing I know, I'm getting on my knees, and I got a guy who's standing over me with a sword, and he's doing the whole whatever the ritual things, the things that they said. And they said, rise as a knight of the Royal Order of Constantine the Great and St. Helen. I'm like, what the heck just happened to me? So it was really interesting because it took about, I don't know, at least a month for let this thing kind of sink in that both my wife and I were knighted, and we have this official title called Sir, so.
What would you rather use though, sir or doctor? Because you are a doctor too.
Yeah, they're both kind of cool, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of people, you can use both, right?
Can you?
use-
Like, how would that sound? Sir, doctor?
yeah, that's exactly it is. Sir,
Okay.
Dr. Anthony, exactly.
Wow. Well, that's yeah, and I believe that you're very, very big on it now. You're doing a lot of connecting a lot of people to become royalty as well. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, maybe another time we could dive into that. I'm really curious on how that works. Dame Doria Cordova, a friend of mine, she's always talking about the royalty thing, and I just
I think someone like you should be knighted.
yeah, I'm just like you described yourself in that story with that. I don't know anything about it. It's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, John. Appreciate that. All right, John. So next question. Now you experienced bullying as a kid, so I want to just highlight this for just a minute or less. What is your message for anyone who is a bully? Like
Mhm.
whether they're mostly probably kids, but if you had a message, you were able to talk to them, and one-on-one for 30 seconds or so, what would you say to them?
Well, I think bullies, I think, are insecure themselves. You know what I mean? So that's why they're bullying, so that they feel they have some sort of, seniority or domination. Now, I'm not like a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything like that, but I just feel that most people who are bullies are very insecure with themselves, and that's why they got to go and attack people that are smaller than them. Very rarely do you see a bully go and pick on someone bigger than them. Does that make sense? Right.
Hmm.
And so I tell people who are being bullied that you have to, feel like it's kind of like, I hate to, bring religion up, but I mean, think of how many people in the past, in the biblical ages, that were bullied. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so, can you do me a quick favor?
Good, John.
Yeah. So, so I tell people who are being bullied, don't take it, personally. It's just that if you're taking it, I tell people, I said, listen, look at that person and know that that person is insecure with themselves. Okay. And, don't let it bother you in any way. You take the higher road and you just stand tall, and let me just tell you, I've actually, some of those bullies later on in life actually came and told me, like at a reunion, I'm so sorry that I bullied you when I was in elementary school. They said I was very insecure, and I was that guy because I thought if I bullied you that people would see me and I would stand out, and I wanted people to know who I was and this kind of stuff, but I'm terribly sorry. And what happens is that these bullies live with this. They know the difference between right and wrong, and they have to live with it for the rest of their life. I mean, can you imagine? They came to my 5-year reunion from high school to come in afterwards. So imagine all these years they had to live with that, to come and tell me 5 years after my high school reunion to tell me they felt sorry for themselves and they wanted to apologize. So
That was a good feeling for you that, one, you feel better that you understand the situation, and two, that these folks, they got hearts too. At least they came around and were able to help themselves and figure that out for
yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. John, next question. Does someone need to, I think you'll like this. Oh, I'm sorry. One more. How does it feel to fulfill your childhood dream of being rich? So, as a kid, you were always trying to achieve wealth, being a great salesman, et cetera. How does it feel to eventually reach that status? A lot of people, and I just want to preface the question, Viktor Frankl, he talks about the thing called existential frustration. Money and power are one of those things where you get it and you don't know what to do with yourself because you already got everything you wanted in life and you're frustrated with your existence. Like once you actually met that goal, how did it feel? Did you still feel you want to keep going? Any thoughts?
When I was a kid, I walked into a store and I saw a poster, And the poster was a garage full of cars, and it said, and Monday was this car, Tuesday was this car, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that was like, I forget what it was, a poster that I saw, and I bought it, and I looked at it. It was in my room, and I was like, I want that one day, and I saw a house that I would say, I had like a circular driveway, and I'm like, I want that house. And for me, it was like, it wasn't even a dollar amount, like where I said, I want $10 million, I want $25 million. Like, I wanted those cars and I wanted those houses. And I fulfilled that, right? And as soon as I fulfilled it, it was kind of like, oh, I did it. And then I was kind of like, now what? You know what I mean? I was like, okay, like, now what? Like, I'm here, I was like, I did it. And I did it early on in my life. And it was like, now what do I do? So then I started to realize that I had to dream bigger, right? That my dreams were too small, I had to dream much bigger. And then I started buying more materialistic things, so I went and bought a boat, I bought a yacht, I bought multiple homes, I bought buildings, and then I thought, okay, I'm there. And then I was like, And I mean, I hate to burst people's bubbles. It is comforting to know that that we have built a financial fortress around our family and we're secure there. We feel pretty well protected, but it wasn't fulfilling. Does that make sense? Right? I still feel, some people say, maybe you're going through a midlife crisis or something. And I'm like, I don't know if that's what it is, but I just don't feel, like I have a Rolls Royce. It's what they call a Rolls Royce Ghost. It's an extended version, cost me $600,000, and I have 2,000 miles on this car. So it just kind of gives you an idea how often I drive it, which is like never. Okay. I have other cars, I think, that I still have like 15 miles or 30 miles on it. So it's just a few more miles than what I drove it off the lot for. You know what I mean? And so again, those things haven't fulfilled me. And so now, though, all my bare necessities have been secured, I think what's fulfilling now for me is helping other people achieve success in all areas of their life. Okay. So when Napoleon Hill talks about being rich, most people equate the word rich with money or finance. But he says, when you read the book, Think and Grow Rich, he'll actually say that he wants you to be rich in all areas of your life. So what are those rich all areas? And I've broken them down into what I call the 5 F's, which is number 1, your faith. Okay, it doesn't have to be in any particular order. Everybody can prioritize their F's in however way they want, but we'll say faith, family, fitness, finance, and last is fun. Right? So can you be rich in all those areas? And one person asked me one time, what do you mean by fun? Like, you got to be rich and having fun? Because I know so many people that have been so obsessed about just making money, and they got a lot of money. They got a lot of cash laying around. And I said, when was the last time you went to Europe? They've never been. Like, how do you have all this money and you haven't traveled the world? Like, they don't know how to enjoy their wealth, and so they can't even be rich and having fun. They don't have any parties, they don't have any gatherings. I mean, they're just so obsessed about making money, and it's consumed them. And so for me, I think I'm in a place where I just want to help people now, and it's much more fulfilling to do that, and it brings greater joy in my life than to say I'm going to go buy another McLaren. You know what I mean? So, but hey, it's nice to know that all my bare necessities are done, are taken care of.
It's a brilliant response, John. Just real quick, if you ever read How to Be Rich by John Paul Getty, that's one of my favorite books from, I think, 1969 or something like that. He had the Getty fortune, Getty family, the oil business, and one page, I have it stapled on my wall. It's a whole paragraph. He's talking about his friend who didn't have any of his money, but he was kind of jealous of him because he got to live a great life going everywhere. He goes, only if I wrote that extra book I wanted to, I'm paraphrasing, only if I read that extra book that I wanted. Only if I did that African safari that I always wanted to go to. And here's one of the richest guy in the world in the 1960s, and he didn't get to do that. And the first time I read that, I said, geez, I think I'm on the right track, because I always valued experience first. And I had to just step back for a second and say, okay, I'm on the right track. Just focus on the experiences. The money will come later. And you got to get this balance, like you said. So yeah. Thank you, John.
Sure.
John, next question I want to ask you is about how important are masterminds? Maybe 30 seconds or so. Now, I have, just to preface that, I have a mastermind with Mark Victor Hansen and Sharon Lechter in Arizona in early March. By the way, you're welcome to come as a VIP if you're interested. It's
Sure.
going to be great, about 20 people. So I'm just curious your thoughts on the value of masterminds, especially ones that are valued at what people would think is a lot of money, but it's really not.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I mean, it's exactly what Napoleon Hill talks about, is a group of like-minded people that have a specific goal that come together and share ideas and views. And so when you have a group of these minds, different minds, and you don't have to be like a PhD or someone who's like, high IQ, just to see it in every different perspective, and you share these ideas, it's the best way to grow. Which is what essentially, when you're going to college, they're having masterminds. They call them a group study, right? You get these kids that are in the same school, the same class, and you come together and you bounce ideas off each other. So the main thing I tell people is, when you do get together, it doesn't become a master. I was looking for a word. I wanted to say bitching. I don't know if I can say that, but we don't want it. Yeah, we don't want it to be a master bitching session. You know what I mean? You want to come together and have some growth ideas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John.
Masterminds are huge.
Great response, John. 30 seconds or less. Should rich people spoil their children?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Thank you, John. John, you might really love this question. I heard you kind of go in a different direction on a former interview. Does someone need to increase their financial and social intelligence for every level of desired increased wealth? So in other words, as you go up the ladder and you want to make more and more wealth, you want to go from making $1 million to 10 million to 100 million. As you want to keep pushing raise that glass ceiling, do you need a different kind of intelligence, both social and financial, to make that climb?
Well, so here's the thing. What I tell people to do is, there's never an amount that you're not going to want to hit. Like, I tell people, because here's what happens. As soon as you get $500,000, and you know what you want? You want $1 million. And after you hit $1 million, you're going to want 2. After you hit 2, you're going to have 5. After you hit 5, you're going to hit 10. And it just never stops, right? I mean, as soon as you get 100 million, you want 200 million. You hit 200 million, you want 400 million. And you just like, so now your whole life is about just making more money, and why? You know what I mean? And then at the end of it, you kind of go, did I just spend my entire life just making money? You know what I mean? Like,
Chasing the carrot.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, really? Here's what I said. Let's figure out what Arlene and I did is, we sat there and said, what do we want in life? Like, what does our dream life look like? Okay. And we said, okay, well, we would like to have a house, our main home. We would like to maybe have a second home. Okay. It was just one second home, right? We said we want to have a few cars. I'd like, she wanted a few kind of purses that she wanted. We want a few watches. We wanted a boat. We wanted a yacht. And that was it. And we put down all the things that we ever wanted to have. Okay. And then we said, okay, after that, if we wanted to go out and just help people, how much money do we need to be able to live on? Right. So I said, if I can go and get $10 million, right? Like making money for me, right? $10 million that would generate 10% return, I would get $1 million a year. Could I take $1 million a year and survive and pay my bills, have some staff members, help me out on a daily basis with, little stuff. And can I still travel, and can I enjoy my life? Excuse me. And that was it. So we had a dollar amount and we had an income amount. And we said, well, once we reach that point, we're not going to be worried about money and finance. And once we're there and we're secure there, then we're going to be able to go and help other people. And fortunately for us, those things that we wanted happened early on in our life, right? I mean, we started, making millions in the second year. So fortunately, by the 5th year, we were pretty comfortable. We were just hoping this wasn't going to be temporary. And it has lasted us almost 30 years now. So.
Well, let's say you want to make $1 billion. Do you have to get a different kind of mindset, hang with different groups of people to think that way? Or you got the formula pretty much, whether you're 10 million or 10 billion, it's the same.
Yeah, but it happens automatically. So for instance, like some of the properties that we own, like I bought it for, let's say, $1 million, but that property is now worth 5 million. Does that make sense? So I didn't have to change my mindset, right? I had to change the way I thought. It just went up by itself, right? I mean, we bought a $40 million building, and that $40 million building now is worth 100 million. Okay, so we didn't have to think differently. It just went up in value. You know what I mean? It just happens. And once you realize, oh my God, like I have that money, it's like you start to realize, like, oh, I had no idea it was worth that much.
Thank you, John. Brilliant response. John, why must we take the time to think about what we think about? Maybe 30 seconds. Should we take the time? Why should we take the time to think about what we think about?
Yeah, I ask that question frequently to people. Do you ever think about what you're thinking about? Because here's the thing. Our thoughts, okay, and I'm just gonna give another acronym here for everyone. It's called TFA. Okay. So your thoughts will influence the way you feel. Okay. And then how you feel will influence the way you act. And then your actions will determine your results. So results are all predicated on your thoughts. Right. So let's just go. Let's think of a thought. Like, let's think of a thought of, I get pissed off and I get angry, right? My thought is anger. Then how does that affect my feelings? I get pissed off and angry. I get in a bad mood, right? And then if I get in a pissed off, bad mood or whatever, some people, it triggers them to their actions is to hurt somebody, beat them up, punch them, knock them out or whatever, slap someone, right? And then the result is what? I mean, marriages fall apart, friendships fall apart, you end up going to jail, you get sued by, a civil party. And all this was predicated on what you're thinking about. So if you think about positive things, and this is why I tell people, guard your mind from all negativity. It's so critical. Like I don't even let people come and tell me negative crap. Like I don't even want to hear it. I said because I pay someone else to deal with all this negative crap, right? I want that, yeah, because I pay somebody and I go, you deal with all the negative crap. I don't want to deal with the negative crap. That's why I pay you, right? That's why I have lawyers. That's why I have accountants. That's why I have staff members that handle the negative stuff. I don't want to deal with that. I don't even want to watch the news, right? Because we already know what's going to happen when you turn on the news, right? We already know what's going to happen when you listen to radio, so I don't read the newspaper. I don't go to Yahoo or whatever and read all that crap. I want to go and listen to a podcast going to help me think differently, right? Get me to do stuff in a positive way.
Brilliant response. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. All right. We've got Sir John Shin here, folks. We're rounding the bases. We've got temple questions for you, John. We've asked everyone on here from Dr. Dennis Waitley to Brett Favre. Sharon Lechter was on here twice. You name it. So here's the questions for you. The question of the day to start this off, John. Can one book change the world? Maybe 30 seconds.
Well, it changed the world in what way? In a positive way? In any way?
Well, I like you. I try to stay positive, but we can go the other route too.
Yeah, for me, I'm a huge fan of Think and Grow Rich, right? Yeah. And I have not heard anybody say, "Hey, I read Think and Grow Rich and it hurt me and it was detrimental." Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a powerful book. Can one book like the Bible, right? The Quran or whatever, so there is potential that it could change the world.
And in your case, can one movie change the world?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, John. All right, John, what role has networking played in your life? Maybe 30 seconds.
Everything, right? I'm a huge networking guy. I mean, ever since I was in business where we used to go and meet people, I know now some people are a little freaked out about, coming to big group settings and stuff like that, but you can still do networking. There's so many different apps you can use about networking. You can network on Facebook, you can network on, Zoom calls, so networking is huge. You have to go out there and network with people to grow in any kind of business.
Brilliant response. Thank you, John. Next question is an extension of that. Is mentoring important? And who are some of your mentors?
Oh, mentoring is everything. So if you don't have a mentor, then you should find a mentor, right? And let me just tell you, I've had several mentors in my life, and what I do is when I look at, like, I have one guy, his name is Rich Tholley, he's an amazing mentor of mine. Another one is a guy named Monty Holm. Another one is a guy named Greg Kapp. And when I saw this guy named Monty Holm, he had a big family, lots of children, okay? And I read a book one time, and the book basically said, I'm not going to mention the book, but he basically, and some of you might know once I say this, he says, you can't have a family and be making millions of dollars a year. It's just not possible, right? And I was really saddened by that. I'm like, wow. It was like one of those moments where it kind of like made me think for like a few weeks, like, wow, I can't have like a big family and make millions of dollars and have a wonderful marriage. I was so like devastated, because that's where I really wanted to have the cake and eat it too, and everything else. And then and it was a bestseller and all that. And this person was a very iconic individual. And I think he, became a president and, that kind of stuff, So I won't say any more than that, Yeah. You kind of know what this book was, right? So then I meet this guy named Monty Holm, and he's been married for 30 plus years. I think maybe now 40 years or so. Beautiful family, very wealthy. And I'm like, how come he can have it all?
Right. That's just, this proves it right there.
Yeah. So I went and sought him out. I'm like, listen, I know I'm sure a lot of people approach you. Everybody wants to know the secret from you and all that. But listen, I said, I am very teachable. I am very coachable. I will move at the speed of instruction. And let me just tell you, I would love and be honored for you to coach me and guide me and mentor me. And he's like, yeah. He goes, I'll call you. Give me your phone number. And you know what the crazy thing is? 3 days later, he called me. And so I picked up the phone. We started chatting, and that guy started putting me in the right direction. And one of the greatest things about having that mentor is I was doing certain things, but I didn't know if it was the right thing. So he asked me what I was doing. And so he would say, oh, that's great. And so for him to tell me that what I was doing was I was on the right track gave me confirmation that I was going down the right path. You know what I mean? It's like golfing, you go and you take a club and you swing your golf club, and you didn't take any lessons. And then you meet some guy who comes and teaches you, and he says, oh no, he says, you're holding the club the wrong way. Your body's not the right way. You're not shifting the weight the right way. And so they're coaching you, but you thought you knew it all, so you need to have a really good coach and you need to have a really good mentor.
John, I just, a thought came through my head. I cannot have this interview go without mentioning martial arts. I can't believe we didn't even talk about it yet. So from my understanding, you're a black belt in martial arts. And was there any mentors that you had from martial arts that might have impacted your life? Because I know in my life, martial arts has definitely changed the way I think about life. So
yeah, for sure. So so when I was 5 years old, earlier I was telling you I was bullied. And I mean, I got my butt kicked pretty good, came home, busted, lip and, bloody nose, black eyes, bruises, the whole night. So my mom finally said, that's it. My dad, we're putting you in martial arts. And I got into a school, and the school was very unique because it taught me 3 different arts. Okay. So Taekwondo, Judo, and Hapkido. So it taught all three of those. Okay. And so the one that I really, excelled in and was like my main thing was Taekwondo. But our master drilled into us his three philosophies. And one of them was, he said, to be patient. Okay. And the second was respect. And three is humble. Right. So we would literally, like at the end of the class, we would all line up, standing in attention. And then we would say the three main philosophies, and he would say respect, and we'd have to shout out respect, and he goes humble. We would scream humble, but patience was one that he drilled in all the time. Like, listen, if you want to be a black belt in our school, it took 6 years to get a black belt. Okay, and so my other friends would see that. I was a green belt and a blue belt, 3 years, 4 years, I'm still now a purple belt, 5 years, I'm a brown belt, I'm still. And I had friends who would go down the street to another martial arts school and they say, hey, at our school, you can get a black belt in 2 years. Does that make sense, right?
It disturbs me like crazy. I used to see a lot of some academies would give black belts to people that are like little kids under 10, and they were there for 3 months. I'm like, kind of like they're sucking up to the parents because they pay more money. And that's not what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is we would go to the tournaments, right? All the state tournaments and national tournaments. And you would see these people who got their black belt after a year and a half, 2 years, going into a ring with a guy from our school that took 6, 7 years to get a black belt. It was not even a comparison. The speed, the muscles that you develop during that period of time, a year and a half, 2 years to get a black belt, those people were the ones that were getting their noses smashed, carried off on a stretcher. The paramedics were there sticking, this is kind of gross for some people, but, stuff up their nose, they can open up the airways. Let me just tell you, it was detrimental to them, right? Because they were looking for the shortcut. And so in our school, that's why he kept on saying, be patient. It is not about just getting a black belt. It's about developing the muscles that you need to get to where you're at, and to really hone in on all your skills. And it's the same thing where I tell people in business, like, don't try to go and make $1 million in 6 months. And if it doesn't work, you don't say, oh, this is God's sign that I was not destined to be a millionaire. Okay, because you are destined to be a millionaire, but you need to be patient for everybody. Everybody has to be patient.
Isn't this like a metaphor on life, John? Like if you think about it, it ties right into self-help and Napoleon Hill. Like, what does Napoleon Hill say? One of his top things: if you can't control your own mind, your mind will control you. So why would your martial art teacher have you repeat humility, patience, all these like great words about that has nothing to do with fighting per se? But it's probably because they know from wisdom thousands of years ago, if you can control your emotions, then you have a better outcome, a probability of being successful in physical form, right? And this is an analogous to what we're talking about, self-help and business. Like if you can control your emotions by being humble and letting other people go first, be patient, that allows you to control your emotions so you can be highly successful financially as well. Like, do you see the comparison? I mean, similarity?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Brilliant response. John, just a few more questions, figure about 20 seconds each. What are your favorite financial books, being a financial guru? What's your thoughts on
that? One of the books I like is written by Tony Robbins, and it's actually called Money, Master the Game by Tony Robbins.
Okay, Tony. Yeah, that's a good one. He interviewed a lot of really successful folks, I believe, in that book.
Yeah, he's got some great financial strategies that I actually talk about in a lot of my masterminds. And I was actually going to write a book about all those things. And I'm like, no, I don't need to. I can just tell everybody to go buy Tony's book, Give
him the Amazon link, you get referral fee.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. John, do we need money to survive?
Well, I think you need some amount of money. Does that make sense, right? Just to pay your bare necessities, put a roof over your head, food, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean too. Like just something. You need some kind of money of some sort to do that, survival needs and stuff. So, which is an extension of that is finance necessary for everyone. Now, I'm talking about finance, the science of finance. not finance like funding as it's commonly confused. The science of, is it necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think here's the thing. You know, let's say let's say you make $1 million. Okay, let's just use that as an example. Okay, and everybody's always trying to manage their expenses, so they'll cut employees, salary, people, cut rent, go to a smaller space, everything, just to save more money in the percentage of what you're spending per item. Okay, yet here, if you look at $1 million, the federal tax rate could go as high as 40%. And then if you live in certain states like California, you're going to pay another 13%, you know, up to 15% in state taxes. So if you get 40% federal and 15% state, 55%. So if you make $1 million and the government is taking 55% of your money, shouldn't you try to learn like how to mitigate the 55%?
That's a job right there. You can create yourself a job just to make money, get some of that money back.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's really interesting because people will look at a guy like, let's say, a Will Smith, okay, or a Jennifer Lopez. And I know them both, they're good friends. And they're both, most people look at Will Smith and go, he's an actor, he's a rapper or whatever. Oh, J-Lo, she's a dancer and a singer. You know, but both of them are business entrepreneurs. They know money, they know the science of money, they get it. You know, another one is Dwayne Johnson, right? I mean, he understands money and finance.
Did you interview these folks for your movie?
I did. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm from Philadelphia. Will Smith is an icon here.
Well, Will is actually, he lives in our community here. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we're also we're all both in the same golf clubhouse.
Not on Clubhouse, same clubhouse.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. Brilliant response. John, how important is having a purpose in business, and what is your purpose?
Well, purpose is everything. Like what, you know, that's one of the first questions I ask people is, what is your purpose, not only in business, but in life, right? And so for me right now, my purpose, I think, is to educate more people about money and finance. And that comes back to the question I just shared with you. If the government is going to be taking, and by the way, you know, we could debate about this all day with people who disagree, but I don't think that taxes are going down, right? In fact, taxes are going up, you know, and as taxes are going up, shouldn't you learn more about ways to mitigate your taxes, you know? And the taxes are not just at the federal level, at the state level, but they're also at your local level, they're at the city level, and they're at the county level. So you're paying like all these different levels of taxes just to do business, you know? So I just need to educate people all about the different tax strategies and forming different entities as well, you know, LLCs and corporations and limited liability partnerships and all that kind of stuff.
Brilliant response, John. And just to clarify, audience, John is talking about how to avoid tax versus evading tax. Two different things. Doing it the legal way, which there are plenty of creative strategies to do it, right, John? Yeah,
there's a difference between tax planning and tax evasion, right? And the difference is 26 years in jail. We do the tax planning, which means everything we take from the IRS code, right? Whereas the other one is you just try to evade the taxes, and that will put you in prison.
Thank you, John. John, two more questions left. What would you like to accomplish in the next 10 years or so, and why?
During the next 10 years, well, I would say in the next 5 years for sure, I'd like to get more people to watch the Think and Grow Rich movie. I want it to be a massive movement, you know, and that is one of my main goals. The other thing is I would like to speak over the next 10 years is basically to talk to 500 million people in front of be like live in front of them around the world.
What's your plan of attack to do that?
Well, so right now we're on the Think and Grow Rich World Tour. So we're traveling right now to 26 different countries, and we're speaking in front of large groups. And the good news is that there's a worldwide Think and Grow Rich fan base. So there are groups in these different countries who are organizing large audiences for us to come and speak at.
John, talk real quick about that tour. So I didn't know that you're actually on tour right now. How long has it been going on for, and what was your plan of attack for that?
Well, so here's what happened. Okay, so when the movie first came out, Think and Grow Rich, the movie, it came out October 2018. We did a theatrical release October, November, and December. That was very intentional, so we can get people to think differently, right? We talked about that earlier, to prepare for the new year, starting in January. Let's take off. So we launched it, and then we went to the digital platforms, and then we went to the we did these free movie nights. Okay, and then what ended up happening is people started saying, well, when are you going to come and show that movie in our country? And I thought, and that is where we went to different countries. Like, we'd go to Spain, and instead of me figuring out how to distribute a movie in Spain, we sold a license agreement to the people in Spain, and they started showing it in Spain. That's what we did in Germany and all these different countries. So that's how, we were able to do $65 million in licensing, rights around the world. And so then those people said, hey, can you come to our country and speak in our country? And I was like, I'd love to, and they said, okay, great. What's your fee? And I was, I never said like, this is my fee. And I said, well, what's your budget? What are tickets?
Back to them.
Yeah, I was like, what are you guys selling tickets at? And based on that, I would say, well, here's my fee. How about if I take a percentage of the total ticket sales or something, or sometimes, I said, how about if you cover my airfare and you do this and that? And before you knew it, I started showing up to some of these places, and they had thousands and tens of thousands of people in a room. And I was like, what the heck? Like, it blew me away, And I was like, all right. And then after I spoke, I got a standing ovation. People said, when are you coming back? And then when I came back, and they had a bigger crowd, so the movement is already happening. We're touring 16 cities around the US, 26 different countries. And we're exploding right now,
Well, if you ever come to Philly, let me know, John. Like, I'd be honored to have you here, and any way I can help out. It's my city, so.
Well, we should do it. We should, put together an event, a live event out there in Philadelphia,
Let's do it. Thank you, John. Appreciate you, man. Wow, that's amazing. So are you actually going international at this point, or right now you're focusing on domestic?
Oh yeah, we're international. We're everywhere. Yeah, in fact, one's happening in Romania. They're expecting about 5,000 people in Romania.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Last question, John. What would you like to be your legacy to this world?
Wow. Such a good question, because I talk about legacy planning all the time. What is the legacy? Would I ever be remembered for anything? I wish my legacy is, I hope that people say, that John was like the king of finance. He taught everybody about money, finance, financial literacy. And I do have a foundation called the Think Legacy Foundation. And basically it's a program for anyone. There's no age. I don't care how old you are. If you have a pulse, you can get into the program, and we'll start teaching you about entrepreneurship and leadership. And there's no cost. It's free. You just got to show up to blow up.
Love it. Great. Thank you, John. Appreciate you. John, appreciate you. We're going to do quick bonus questions. We got 3 bonus questions. Figure about a minute each, and then we'll close out. I'm just curious. I heard Gary Vaynerchuk talk about this great conversation one time, I believe with Grant Cardone. This was a long interview a long time ago. Does the average American, the average immigrant in America have a better work ethic than average local Americans? So immigrants versus local Americans, which one will work harder, would outwork the other? If you could take the average person, of course, there's going to be lots of different examples, but the average, if you put it all together, whatever that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's what I think. I think everyone takes for granted what they have. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I went to New York and I got in a taxi and I wanted to go to the Empire State Building. So I get in the car or the taxi and the guy drops me on. I say, hey, when I get there, what do I do? What do I, where do I go? And he goes, I have no idea, sir. And I said, well, have you ever been there? And he goes, no. And I said, well, where are you from? And he goes, Brooklyn. And I said, great. And he goes, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. And I said, so let me get this straight. You're born and raised in Brooklyn, but you've never been to the Empire State Building. And he goes, never. And he goes, well, where are you from, sir? And I said, I'm from California. And he goes, where in California? I go, Southern Cal. And he goes, how far are you from Disneyland? I go, probably about 45 minutes. And he goes, oh my God, do you go there like every weekend? And I'm like, and I thought to myself, it's probably been about 10 years since I've been to Disneyland, right? And so, but then there's a museum, the Getty Center Museum, which I drive by almost every single day, okay? And it's crazy because like there's buses that come and tour buses and people, students, have part of their field trips will go to the Getty Center Museum. I've never gone in my entire life, yet I've been driving by it my entire life in Southern California. And so we take for granted all the things that we have. A lot of us, we take for granted the fact that we are citizens, in the United States, and we have this great opportunity to go and live this amazing life. And yet we choose to go down the path and have a job, be an employee, right? And so other immigrants who come from other countries that come to the United States, they're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I can do this and make this amount of money. I could start a business and I can make that. They're so much more open-minded and they're so hungry. They're just hungrier than most people in America, I think, if you were born here.
That's a brilliant response, John. And the other two questions are related. So for example, the second one is, how much more opportunity do you think that people living in this free country or other free countries have over others who live in countries where the government imposes more restrictions on their freedom? How much more opportunity do you think that people living in these countries have over those other people?
I mean, here's the thing. In other countries, if you brought together a group of 10 people and said you're having a mastermind, you could go to jail for life, right? Because they think you're plotting a coup to overthrow the government or something, right? I mean, you couldn't even get a mastermind together. You couldn't even get a group of people together. Yet we can all come together, any one of us, and put a bunch of people in a hotel room, right? We can all meet at back of a restaurant in like some private room. We can go into a podcast and have a mastermind. There's so many things that we can do. We can go into a clubhouse and have conversation. These are things that you couldn't do in many, many different countries. And the fact that people aren't doing it just blows my mind.
Brilliant response, John. Brilliant response. John, last bonus question. Why do you think that so many people who live in free countries don't fully capitalize on all of their opportunities? It's a great way to conclude this podcast.
Well, I think a lot of people choose to either, I said, look, you could either be better or get better, right? I mean, excuse me, if you could either be bitter or get better, you choose. And I think right now, most people in America just flat out want to be bitter and angry and point fingers at everybody, but instead they can get better by listening to podcasts, by coming to events, by seeking out a mentor, by joining a mastermind, right? By surrounding themselves around the right kinds of people. I've heard people say that, you become the average of the 5 people you associate with.
Jim Rohn, I think, right?
I mean, I don't know if there's any particular studies that have been done to show if it's 4 or 5 or 6 or 8. But here's what I do know, that there is some validity to that even if you associate with one person who smokes, you know what you're going to become? A smoker, right? If you don't drink and you associate with one person on a daily basis and all they do is drink alcohol, guess what you're going to do? You're going to end up becoming a drinker, right? And so even if you can hang out with one person, right, and get that buddy system going and begin with that as a mastermind, and understand that every single one of us here, right, has the ability, to become successful. I believe that God, here's what I honestly believe is that we're all wired for success, but we're programmed to fail. Okay. And the reason why I say that is because every single one of us within the sound of my voice right now, as they hear this, you were created in somebody's image. And you're wired for success. But the reason why you're programmed to fail is because you listen to all the nonsense on TV. You listen to all the BS that's out there, right? And then you believe this BS, and it's programmed your BS. And what does BS stand for? It stands for your belief system. Okay? You have bought into your own BS.
You can really take what you said, because it's just so powerful, back to the time you were born. Like, if you think about it, I mean, you know, regardless of your family structure, even with the best intentioned family, people are constantly sending all the signals to you and programming you with negative stuff. So you become an accumulation of all those experiences. So at some point we have to break the mold, kind of like Leonardo da Vinci, you know, chip out the real self from all this toxicity that really built upon us over years and years.
Yeah.
Right?
So I just tell people, look, we're at the beginning of the 2023, it's the beginning of the new year. Let's not focus on what you guys did or did not do last year, because nobody cares anymore. It's like, what are you going to do now? You know, one of the things that people will say, they come, they'll see my car collection, they may see my home, they'll get on my yacht or whatever, and then they'll say, man, you are balling.
Bro, how many cars you got, John?
16.
Jeez, you are balling.
Yeah, you're balling. But if you want to be balling, the word ballin, BALLIN, says, if you read the word, it says be all in. So in 2023, I challenge everyone to just be all in whatever you want to do to be successful.
I love it. Beautiful, beautiful way to conclude. So thank you so much, John. I want to thank you for being here. An honor to have you again, sir. And I appreciate all that you have done today. And I'm sure it's going to impact a lot of people. Folks, we got John is also going to be a Clubhouse guest on my stage in the Finance Club 2 Fridays from now, which is the 20th. So January 20th, between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. He's going to be the main guest speaker. We run that stage for about 6 hours. And the theme of that room will have his name built into it. And the theme will be around Sir John Shin's theme. So definitely stay tuned to be there in the Finance Club on Clubhouse, January 20th, between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. John, before we conclude, any last minute thoughts that you'd like to add, or if you want to tell us about where they can find out more information about you? John, the floor is yours.
Well, all I'm going to say is every single person here is a masterpiece. No matter what someone tells you, you are a masterpiece, because you are a piece of the master. So therefore, you should be unstoppable. Go and conquer 2023. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can hit me up on Instagram. I am on Instagram. You can send me a message there, and I'll always reach out to you guys. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, John. Any other social media sites you're on? And also, what's your website address as well?
So my website is John, JOHN, Shin, S as in Sam, HIN.com, johncShin.com. I am also on Facebook, so you guys can follow me on Facebook as well. And as we get closer and closer and get connected, and I'll give you guys my cell number.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. John, are you on Twitter, by the way? Because I got a big presence on Twitter too.
I was, but then we got hacked, and I was like, no, I'm done with Twitter. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, John. Appreciate your time. And folks, we're going to conclude here. Thank you again. You've been watching the Dr. Finance Live podcast. Dr. Anthony Criniti IV here, also known as Dr. Finance. Definitely check out John's books. His book, Think and Grow Rich, the Asian book, as well as Think and Grow Rich, the movie. John, what was the name of your book again? The official name?
How Rich Asians Think.
How Rich Asians.
Yeah.
How Rich Asians Think. How Rich Asians Think and Grow Rich. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. All right, folks, definitely stay tuned for Clubhouse night. But other than that, folks, if you want to learn some more about finance, here's my 3 finance books I wrote as a professor, actually almost 10 years ago, this first one, Necessity of Finance. And then I wrote The Most Important Lessons in Economics and Finance. And finally, The Survival of the Richest, a 500+ page book with all my conclusions about in 2016. So thank you again, folks. drfinance.info is the website. We're going to blast this podcast out to YouTube and all the social media directories. I'm also going to put it on that website check that out as well. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe, and let us know if you got any questions. You have all the info here. So thanks again, folks. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye now.